Hello. All right. So that does suck, and it sucks really bad. So I work at a place called Taxually. We work with taxes. That also sucks. So maybe that's something that keeps me constantly focused on things that suck. I don't know. But I'm going to talk about a thing called Goodhart's Law today, which is why it sucks. And before I do that, I've been at Taxually now for just about a year. And being there for a year enables me to now open with the following joke. When I joined Taxually and kind of negotiated the role that I needed and wanted to do there, I discovered shortly after I did that there's a really dubious acronym for my new job, which is this: I am the CPTO at Taxually. So now I get to go on stage with that behind me and just say that and see who laughs, because that's always a good sign. I'm going to open with a joke too. So my joke is this. It's called the streetlight joke. Do you know the streetlight joke? Yeah, a couple people. Okay. I've been told on good authority that this actually has its roots in an African fable. Unfortunately, I don't know that original version. I'm going to tell you the version I know. So imagine a posh venue. Think ballet, opera, something like that. Really well-dressed couple coming down the stairs from the venue. Think black tie, ball gowns. And they see an older gentleman in the same getup, so clearly one of their own, crawling around on the ground under a streetlight. So they walk over. This is strange. They don't suffer from the bystander effect. They go see what's going on. And they say, "What's happening? What's wrong?" And the old guy says, "I've lost my watch." And you can now clearly tell the old guy is drunk. The younger couple, again, no bystander effect. They're an outlier. They decide, "I'm going to help." So they crouch down in the space under the streetlight and try to help this older guy find his watch. Doesn't take long, minute, 2 minutes, and they realize the watch is not here. At this point, now irritated, they say to the older guy, "Look, I'm sorry, but your watch is not here." The older guy kind of leans back against the streetlight and laughs. And they say, "Why are you laughing?" "Well, I didn't lose it here. I lost it over there." And he points like around the corner of the posh venue towards a kind of a darkened alleyway. "Why are we searching here? There's light." The light represents what we can measure, what we can see. The enterprise version of this that I heard once a long time ago was, if it's not an SAP, it doesn't exist. Right? I wrote my first line of code professionally. I'm much older than I look, in 1989. And I started wrestling with products and trying to turn them into something that somebody would buy about 15 years ago. And along the course of the journey that career represents, I have bumped into this over and over and over again. Because as soon as you set something as a target, it goes wrong. Two things basically start to happen. First off, you distort the system under measurement. It becomes something other than it was before you set the target. And then as a consequence of that, the second thing that happens is the measurement stops telling you what you think it should, what it says it does. This is named after this gentleman, Charles Goodhart, and he first started talking about it in 1975, only shortly before I wrote that line of code. And some examples of how this, in a jokey way, might happen is this brilliant cartoon. Basically, as soon as you set the target for one thing, you start getting these unintended consequences, right? You get lots of nails, or you get really heavy nails. Allegedly, this actually happened in the Soviet Union. I don't believe that, but it's a good story. So some of you may be thinking already, it's just game in the system, and that's boring. So I'm going to say two things to you. First off, if that's you, you're this son of a bitch right here. That's you. And the reason why is because Goodhart's law, like these others, and there are deep parallels between Goodhart's law and these others, the observer effect in quantum mechanics, the second law of thermodynamics, these are the deep, fundamental laws of the universe that we live in, even if it is a simulation. They're just the rules of how it works. And whether you like that or not, whether you want to acknowledge the flesh wound or not, it's gonna get you in the end. And This is funny in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. But in the real world, man, this shit has consequences. Pretending that the rules that apply to all of us do not apply will not work. So, what are we going to talk about today? Goodhart's law, unavoidable. What can we do? The second thing that I've learned in my long career is to set expectations. So let me set yours as low as I possibly can. I am not going to give you a silver bullet that will enable you to dodge Goodhart's law, because that isn't possible. I am also not going to give you some fundamental new insight about it, probably, that will radically change your life. Instead, riffing off something that one of the other speakers said earlier, I'm going to basically try to give you some first aid skills so that when you see the bleeding wound, you'll know what to do. There are 4 known flavors of Goodhart's law. Here they are. Let's quickly go through them. Regressive. This is basically about imperfect correlation. So if we say, for example, that IQ is highly correlated with job performance, and that's like a 0.06. Okay, 0.6. But that means there's 0.4 that isn't about IQ. So as soon as you start selecting for IQ, you're excluding that other 40% of the state space, and eventually you start getting suboptimal results. You constrain the state space iteratively, and still it breaks. Extremal, sorry. This is when you are optimizing for something where the system is in a certain state, it's a good thing, but over time, there's a flip, and now it's a bad thing. Eating sugar. We're evolved to do that. The consequences of that are really obvious. Classic correlation does not eat causality. The one that I like about this is the one about ice cream and the summer temperatures in Spain. Do you know that one? Where somebody somewhere once did something that was about, because the amount of ice cream that gets eaten in Spain goes up in the summer, there must be a causal link between that and summer, which would be kind of to use net zero targets as if one were to say, great, well, we need to drop the summer temperature, let's ban ice cream. That wouldn't work. And finally, adversarial. This is the gaming the system one. The Cobra effect is a name for a particular example that allegedly, again, happened in the British Empire, where the imperial forces decided they wanted less cobras, so they started offering a bounty for cobras, which of course led people to start breeding cobras. Right? So what do? This is a law of the universe. Goodhart's law will affect every single thing you set as a target, sooner or later, one version of this or another. What do? Again, no rocket science, just first aid. There are 2 main kinds of band-aids, bandages in British language, that you can apply here, which are indicator pairing, which is a term that comes from Andy Grove's book, where basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to pair them off against each other. If you want to track deployment frequency, but you want to make sure that you're not just deploying stupid stuff, you find some other metric that tells you something about the value or the impact of those deployments, and you watch them both. That increases the likelihood that you're going to notice when Goodhart's law kicks in. Generally speaking, you want to be looking for ways you can pair leading and lagging indicators. That's the most powerful combination, as a rule. Theory of constraint stuff, I'm preaching to the choir here, but it is an obvious way to manage Goodhart's law. If you optimize for system-level constraints rather than localized ones, you will minimize the effects. You will not eliminate Goodhart's law, but you will minimize the effects of it. But watch out for the map-territory relationship here. Anybody know what the map-territory relation is? You know that one? So basically what this means is that the map is not the territory. I used to do a different talk where I talked about this for a long time, another whole half an hour. You throw up a map of the tube map of London, and then you say to anyone who's ever been to London, this is not London. And that's really intuitive when I do it that way. But it's really easy to fall for the fallacy that your balanced scorecard is the thing that you're measuring. And as soon as you do that, here comes Charles Goodhart, ready to get you. The map-territory relation, arguably, mathematically, is Goodhart's law. It's just a different formulation of it. And it still won't work. Not 100% of the time, not for everything, and not necessarily sufficiently, these techniques that I just showed you, for some of the things that you want to do. Because some of the things that you want to do will be so important that you feel like this is not enough. For many things, that might not be the case. And so a big part of the art of management is knowing where you are on this curve. Nothing more than that. The closer you get to the point of diminishing returns, the more likely it is that you should stop. Let it go. The perfect is the enemy of the good, right? But for some things, whether that's how often you want to change out that thing in the wind turbine, you need to be pretty high up on this curve for it to work properly. And for those things, just doing simple indicator pairing or paying attention to the theory of constraints, you may find that that is insufficient. I certainly have in my career. But there's another thing I want to talk about. So I date myself by doing this, obviously. I'm really old, so I have matrix slides in my presentations. But there's another reason I do it, and it's because I keep coming back to there are some really fundamental things that are just really easy to illustrate with matrix metaphors, so forgive me. It's my version of a dad joke. And one of them is this. For 2 out of the 4 versions of Goodhart's law, just being aware of it is usually sufficient to push you pretty far up on the curve of diminishing returns. Just knowing that the black cat exists and spotting it when it's in the room is usually sufficient. That's true for the casual one, and it's also true for the extremal one. The only one that's really kind of mathematically intractable is the regressive one at the beginning, the first one, about the imperfect correlations. So if nothing else as a first aid technique, just having been to this talk, and if you didn't know the words Goodhart's law before, now you do, you're a little further along. I've helped you in that regard. Think about the impact of the things that you're setting as targets and be aware that Goodhart's law could bite you in the rear end. That's the black cat. But there's another reason that I like to use matrix things, because for some of us, we just really like to riff off the red hat thing. I want to know how the sausages are made. I just really like trying to push at the edges of the simulation that we live in. I want to know how fast I can go. And the thing that I've learned over my career is that I need to temper that, obvious speed joke here, with a bit of pragmatism. Because I could spend all day, every day, trying to push against the boundaries of the simulation, and that wouldn't necessarily be generating value for me or my teams, my business, any of the things that I'm actually supposed to be doing. So I need to find a way to push at the boundaries and still know when to stop. I'm experimenting with that in my own work. And what, for lack of a better term, I call what I'm now going to explain to you is an entropy valve. It's a valve to let off some pressure. And the thing that it's letting out is a bit of entropy. The way the entropy valve works is if you think about, the simplest example is to think about an indicator pair that I was talking about before. Say something like deployment frequency and change fail rate. Now, you're tracking that as a pair. You've got a dashboard somewhere where you can see them both. And you can spot when one suddenly seems out of alignment with another, and oh, Goodhart's law. To take that to the next level, to push it like Neo and see how fast you can go, you wrap that in an exception handling mechanism that explicitly defines and allows for your failure parameters around the indicator pair, like a try-catch around it. Here's an example, taken from my own work where the partners at eSynergy are very graciously helping me make some progress. So my team at Tactually is relatively immature. They're relatively junior, the engineering team. So we're working with eSynergy to put the DORA metrics in place to do some accelerating, because that's useful for where they are now. But these are all leading indicators. And in isolation, they're still going to be profoundly subject to Goodhart's law. And I know that. I can see the black cat. So what am I going to do? And yes, we can have a conversation. Actually, I have to leave right after the talk, unfortunately, because the train's late and I have to go catch a flight. But you can ping me online and you can complain to me about mean time to recovery not being a leading indicator. I get that. I told you there'd be some hand-wavy stuff in this talk. But for the sake of argument, these are all leading indicators, and I need to pair them with some lagging indicators. And in particular, ideally, I want to link these velocity indicators with some value indicators, something that shows me that the work that's happening here is actually generating some value for the business. So things like customer acquisition costs, long-term value, but also things like conversion rates or stuff that's just about a flow in the application. And when I've got those indicator pairs in place, then I put an entropy valve in place. And for these, my entropy valve is actually also fairly simple. Again, not rocket science, it's just first aid. I allow for explicit levels of failure, of variation around the indicator pair, but I define what the acceptable level of failure around the indicator pair is, and I track that too. For my velocity ones, I allow a certain degree of exceptions to what's happening there, but I track that. For my value ones, I allow some of them to have no target at all. I can deploy things to production that don't have a commercial target assigned to them. But I keep track of how often I'm doing that. And I measure that too. And this is the valve that allows me to be sure that over time my indicator pair is not malfunctioning itself, because the indicator pair can still become subject to Goodhart's law. Each level itself is only a model. That's a Monty Python joke, if you've seen Holy Grail often enough to catch it. It's just a model, right? And each model, because of the map-territory relation, is subject to these same limitations. It's turtles all the way down. So the art of this becomes figuring out just how far to push and when to stop. Indicator pairing, bit of theory of constraints. Try entropy valves if you think you want to be like me and fly as fast as you can within the simulation. And remember, there are things outside the light that you can't see. Finding the right ways to light them back up without suffering from Goodhart's law is a big part of what we all do as leaders in our companies. If you have any questions or want to argue with me about it, I love doing that. Ping me online, and I'll be happy to continue the conversation with you there. Thanks very much.